wrong way. You guys are just blind. America is blind.
Why I'm negative about positive
Back to the story, because I've got a story.
So I've got some top tips on
It
writing.
tells you to think critically. It helps people like me stop doing stupid things.
So Donald Trump instigated an insurrection against the US government, and the NBC News channel offered a way to understand why the insurrection happened, but it did so unintentionally. It revealed something interesting, and they probably didn't realize that is what they did. And I'm going to show you what they did in this video. So the other day I was searching through streams on YouTube for news about what was happening in the US.
Previously.
Okay, that was me watching a program called I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here. but that's for research. You know, I'm a psychologist, so I was just watching to see how celebrities behave in a jungle environment because I'm interested in environments and celeb people. Okay, so on January 8th, I was looking for news on what was happening in the US because there are some particular people in the US who I care about very much, and I'm worried about things that are going on in the US because I care about those people. Now, I came across a stream from the broadcaster NBC. They were running a news story on the question of how you explain what happened in Washington to children.
The Capitol riot was tough enough for adults to watch and try to process. Now imagine what that was like for kids. Here's Rahima Ellis.
As the nation watched in horror, millions of our children watched too.
It made me feel sad.
Why are they taking stuff?
I got scared for a sec.
We talked with kids 7 to 14 years old to find out what they're thinking about what happened at the Capitol. 7-year-old Mila.
Did you understand why they were doing that?
I did understand that they were mad, but I still don't understand why they would do it.
Psychologists urge
And
parents
of course we have
teachers
the ubiquitous
to help kids
psychologist
talk
there giving advice on what to do. In this instance, there was a school psychologist. Now, you know, us psychologists, we pop up everywhere. Now that news story about explaining what happened in Washington to children gave me a lump in the back of my throat. And I was struck when the interviewer asked the child, did you understand why they were doing that? And the child responded, I did understand they were mad, but I still don't understand why they would do that. And the story ended on a note that families were struggling to explain the insurrection, and the news anchor adding how we're all confused as to why it happened. But then the NBC unintentionally offered us a way to understand it. It was when NBC segued into a final story, which was their light-hearted piece of news about that week's national lottery. And here's that segue in full.
Tonight, families struggling to explain this assault on an American treasure. Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
This is a confusing world for all of us. Up next, billion-dollar dreams inspiring America. After this tough week, Kerry Sanders inspires us with a billion-dollar story.
At the end of a tough week for our country, the giant jackpots have people dreaming big. The first Mega Millions, now at $520 million.
What would you do? Well, I'd probably help the church, help the family, maybe enjoy a little myself.
Add in Saturday's Powerball, and combined, the two equal close to $1 billion.
So what's so interesting about that? Well, what is interesting is how the lottery is presented as the antidote to a dreadful week, an opportunity to have a bit of a flutter on the lottery, and it's described as offering a bit of hope to people after a horrid week of despair as they witnessed an act of domestic terrorism. But that segue actually offered up a very plausible explanation as to why what happened at Capitol Hill happened. The American people are offered the national lottery as an antidote to terrorism. But the lottery is actually an accelerant to terrorism because it's a signal to the thing that causes terrorism. Now, that's quite a thing to say, so I need to explain that. First, let me show you a bit more of that lottery story.
But really, what are the odds? How about a tacky calculation? Mr. Kornacki?
Well, Kerry, okay, you want to get that jackpot, $500 million, you need all 5 balls plus that all-important mega ball. Your odds of pulling that off, 1 in 302,575,350. About as many people as there are in this country.
A chance at the lucky numbers, giving so many something to hope for at a time when we need it most. Kerry Sanders, NBC News.
Good luck, everyone. That's Nightly News for this Friday. Thank you for watching. I'm Lester Holt. Take care of yourself and each other.
So the reporter goes on to say how at the end of such a tough week for everyone, there was a $520 million US dollar jackpot in the lottery, and combined with the Powerball play of $470 million US dollars, that meant potentially someone could win nearly $1 billion US dollars. Then the NBC called on their national political correspondent, Steve Kornacki, who days before had stood in front of the results screen when reporting on the elections in Georgia. Whoa, what a result. And Kornacki, on the lottery results screen, points out that there's a 1 in 300 million chance of a person winning the jackpot. Now, in case you're not good at statistics, those are not good odds. Those odds are as good as zero. Basically, you have no chance of winning the lottery. Not a cat in hell's chance. And you shouldn't be wasting your money on buying a ticket. But, Kornacki doesn't tell us that. Rather, the TV reporter, Kerry Sanders, who's doing the story, at the end of the story, says that the lottery is giving so many something to hope for at a time when we need it most. Now, here's the problem. It's giving so many false hope at a time when they need it least. The lottery is aggressively marketed to poor communities, and it's played mostly by poor people who can't afford to throw their money away. It lies to them. The lottery lies to them by telling them that if they buy a ticket, they have a chance of winning. That's not true. You've got pretty much no chance of winning. And the lottery parallels the American dream. The rags to riches story, which is sold to poor people. That story portrays America as the land of opportunity, where poor people, if they dream hard enough and work hard enough, will lift themselves out of poverty and gain enough riches to live out their dreams. And the American dream is sold primarily to poor people, to urge them to work their way out of poverty. But here, as with the lottery, the odds are stacked against them. Poverty is structurally created. It's been fomented and consolidated for over 2 centuries in a way that stacked the cards against the poor and social mobility. The odds that people can move upwards out of poverty has actually been declining sharply. It's been declining sharply, particularly since the 1980s, such that if you're born in poverty in the US in these days, you're increasingly likely to live your whole life in poverty, and you'll die in poverty. Now, both the lottery and the American dream promise to be a cure for poverty. The lottery promises to raise money for public programs that will help people move out of poverty, but it actually just takes money from the poor to fund projects for the poor and effectively excuses the rich from having to do anything at all. Now, that's not going to reduce poverty. It's just making poor people pay for the problem caused by poverty. The American dream promises to lift people out of poverty through energizing and inspiring the poor. But it doesn't. These days, it just functions to blame people for inequalities that are structural and does nothing to remove the causes of those inequalities. The social inequalities can be clearly seen in income and wealth inequality. The US is one of the most unequal societies in the world when you look at the gap between the rich and the poor. The top 10% in the US on average earn more than 9 times that of the bottom 90%. And the top 1% average over 30 times more income than the bottom 90%. And the most grotesque gap is between the top 0.1% who earn on average more than 196 times. Now, in terms of wealth inequality, in 2019, the wealthiest 1% of Americans held around 40% of all wealth in the US, whereas the bottom 90% held less than a quarter. These income inequalities are grotesque. Now, poor people tend to fall for the illusion behind the lottery. Those in the lowest fifth in terms of socioeconomic status have the highest rate of buying lottery tickets. That's not because they're stupid. I mean, most of us don't understand the nature of mathematical probabilities. You know that 300 million to 1 means no chance in hell. But because their situation is often so precarious economically, they pay or play the lottery out of desperation. When it comes to the American dream, however, things are a bit different here. The poor in the US are increasingly less likely to believe in the American dream than the rich, for example. It tends to be mostly the rich who believe in that story. The social inequalities are so stark and so enduring that poor people have kind of woken up to it, to the lie of the American dream. Poor people know that they're working hard and getting nowhere, and that experience is now intergenerational. So it's generally the rich people who tend to believe in the American dream. And why wouldn't they? That narrative says that successful people are successful because they work hard. And that narrative makes the rich feel good about themselves. They got there through hard work. They also believe that they are setting a good example for others. They have all of this wealth, but that's a good thing because they're inspiring others and are showing themselves as a good example for others. They are mentoring people, yeah? You can be like me. You can be wealthy and successful if you just work hard enough. And it also removes responsibility of the rich to do more to help the poor. Poor people are poor because they're lazy. They're not working hard because if they do work hard, they will achieve their dreams like I did, even though actually I didn't have to work that hard at all, particularly if your name's Donald Trump and you inherited all your wealth. Lost most of it through bad investments, but the wealth was given to you. You didn't work hard for it. Leave Trump alone. Stop having a go at Trump. It's too easy. Now, the mass media and mainstream culture also function to inspire the poor to work hard by laying in front of them the images of the life they could live if only they could make a success of their own lives. TV and film show a constant stream of images of happy, wealthy, middle-class families, along with little peeks into the lives of the super successful, showing the lives of celebrities and the super rich, giving us a glimpse into their houses, their yachts, their collections of shoes and watches and handbags and so on.
One of the most elegant yachts you're ever going to see in your life. Absolutely amazing.
Alex, this is it. This is it.
$100 million private airplane. If Trump ever feels like a luxury helicopter is too cramped, he's always got his luxury private jet to play around in. Inside the master bedroom is a private cinematic entertainment system and a private bathroom. That bathroom, as befitting Trump, sports a sink with a 24-karat gold interior.
He has his own sneaker room, sneaker collection. This is absolutely crazy. There's a lot to take in, but...
Now, the media does this on purpose to sell that same narrative behind the American dream. This could be you one day if you just work damn hard enough. This does little other than to brutalize the poor. It just teases them with a life they will never know, and it pushes people towards to acts of extreme desperation. Now, you have to be careful, because though that extreme desperation can get out of hand, hey, the poor people could turn on the rich people. And we know that poor people have wised up to the lies that they've been fed about the American dream, and that's why we get the politics of divide and rule operating. This is a narrative that's directed specifically to white working class poor. And the narrative says, hey, you, hard-working white folk, we see you struggling, we see life is hard for you, and you know why things aren't working out? Well, because there are others that are trying to cheat the system. They're cheating you out of winning. Cheating you out of jobs. They're cheating you out of money. They're treading all over your dreams. And who are those cheats? Well, they're black folk, or they're immigrants, or they're Jews, or any other group that the elite decide to scapegoat. So to construct those other people as the problem, as the enemy. And that's what we saw play out in the US in the storming of the Capitol Hill. The attack was largely triggered by white supremacist groups who were given the green light by the Trump administration to engage in an act of domestic terrorism as a way to deflect the rage away from the elite and onto the poor. Now, Is all of this just political rhetoric being spewed up by a radical Marxist? Well, I'm not a radical Marxist. It sounds like class war, but I'm not engaged in that class war struggle. But it sounds as though that's where it comes from. Well, that's not where I'm getting this stuff from. I'm getting this stuff from research, studies that have shown that, and studies from sociologists, political scientists, epidemiologists, and lots of those guys, studies that have been telling us for quite some time now that income inequalities are associated with terrorism, such that the wider the inequalities, the more likely the terrorism. So terrorism is primarily a consequence of the extreme desperation that's created by the rising levels of inequality and the toxic ways that desperation is funneled through political contrivance into forms of civil unrest that suits the aims of the ruling elite. Now, I've included a link to an example of that type of research on that link between terrorism and social inequalities and income inequalities in the description box below on this YouTube page. So, to sum up, yes, the insurrection was incited by Trump, carried out largely by white supremacist groups, but that only explains the who, not the why. The more we focus on Trump, the who, the less we focus on the actual causes, the why. And the why can be found in the horrific levels of social inequalities we see in the US. And that is the thing that we were accidentally shown in an NBC news feed that went from considering how we might explain domestic terrorism to children to the purportedly hopeful story about the lottery. And by the way, no one won the lottery that week. So that's enough from me. Till next time, ta-da.
You guys are just blind. America is blind.
Ashley Babbitt, the Air Force veteran shot and killed in the riot, was another QAnon follower. Online, conspiracy theorists are now turning on her.
Cerebellum QAnon people are now all saying it was all made up, a false flag for the deep state.